Typhoon Talim set for landfall in southern China in the next 12 hours. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for July 17th. We still have 3 named storms active around the world, although one of them isn't actually a storm in the exact sense. It's a subtropical depression, Don, in the Atlantic. We've also got Calvin and Talim, of course, all of which are of interest for different reasons. Code orange right now on our operation status. Day 47 of Atlantic hurricane season. We've got Don, which is a subtropical depression, but the National Hurricane Center are expecting it to re-strengthen slightly later on in the week and possibly turn tropical. Another area of interest that we've marked in the deep tropics there, 10% chance from an African wave. Day 65 of hurricane season in the eastern Pacific. Calvin is down to a tropical storm. It just couldn't hold on much longer as it was, and it has weakened substantially. Still quite a way to go before it gets to Hawaii, and a 10% area of interest that we've still got marked well behind it in the eastern part of the ocean. Talim, a strong category 1 and a large one as well, that could cause some severe impacts along the coast of southern China in terms of heavy rainfall, widespread flooding concerns, and maybe a storm surge along with those strong winds. 70% area of interest in the Philippine Sea there, not far from Palau, could become our next significant typhoon threat, and a 10% for the South China Sea for later in the week. North Indian Ocean, quiet, nothing to look at over there. Satellite imagery of the last 24 hours depicts the very large area of rainfall over the South China Sea region, partly to do with Typhoon Talim, but a very large monsoonal type pattern being enhanced to its west, really engulfing the northern reaches of Vietnam. Satellite imagery of all of these systems then. First we'll look at Calvin, and you can see here it's become quite exposed now. Convection still rallying along the eastern side of the storm, but it really is struggling now compared to what it used to look like. Certainly no eye anymore. Convection still looking decent there though on the eastern side into the -70s. Possibly in 1 or 2 spots, though it is struggling now in those latest images, and very bare on the western side. In contrast, here is Talim, which is a big, broad behemoth right now, headed towards the coast of China, the Guangdong province, the western part of it, and it is closing in on landfall already, slowly but surely. Its movement speed isn't particularly fast. I think it's around 7 or 8 miles per hour. Western side much less broad than the eastern side, which is really stacked well up there with very cold cloud tops into the -80s. And there's a look at Don, which, to be honest with you, is actually looking a little bit better than what it's recently looked like on other tropical weather bulletins in the past. Convection blowing up there, but not much going on with it. You can see there it just hangs about. Not much going on in terms of rotation. The winds have slowed to 35 miles per hour. Sea surface temperatures off the coast of Mexico still looking good. They're getting warmer near Hawaii as well, but it's not on the eastern side, so Calvin won't be helped by that. Very warm sea surface temperatures off the Florida Keys, as we've been pointing out over several days, and around the Bahamas, Gulf of Mexico and up the Gulf Stream, well over 30 degrees Celsius, pushing close to 33 degrees in a few spots. And in the deep tropics of the Atlantic, things are looking fairly normal there. The western Pacific, very warm in the South China Sea, of course, where Talim is right now. It's certainly benefited from very warm sea surface temperatures of over 30 degrees Celsius. Philippine Sea also looking good for that next system, 30 degrees plus, although a little cool pool there near the eastern Philippines, the Visayas region. The North Indian Ocean, a big warm slot now off the southern tip of India into Sri Lanka. Bay of Bengal is around normal, 30 degrees plus in 1 or 2 spots. Arabian Sea a little bit behind. Southwest Indian Ocean, much cooler now in its off season, of course. Still a few spots in the mid part of the ocean there that's still looking okay. The deep tropics, Australian region, much cooler now, especially off the Cape York Peninsula, and the South Pacific also. Still a few spots that are still getting some good temperatures, but really no systems to watch. Anomalies, though, above average in the South China Sea. The Western Pacific as a whole around average, though. Eastern Pacific still that hot and cold area there. The Central Pacific well below average. Calvin would have done much better with warmer sea surface temperatures there, no doubt. The Atlantic still well above average in a few spots. It's been calming down just a little bit, but still well above in most spots that matter, up to 3 degrees above average. Oceanic heat content is also sky high over large parts of the Caribbean Sea into the Gulf of Mexico and around the Bahamas. Also good conditions further out to sea there. Off the coast of Mexico also looking decent with moderate oceanic heat content. Western Pacific's actually dropped off a little bit there, but still looking at decent values all across the basin, with extending well towards the north there as well towards Kyushu. So this is Don over the next few days, but the GFS has thrown up a big surprise on day 3, a potential another tropical system that's moving up towards the northeast there. That could be a brief spin-up tropical storm. I'm not convinced that's going to happen yet, but the GFS has been suggesting that for quite some time. Don moving off towards the south and then turning towards the west later on. National Hurricane Center thinks it will turn tropical and then become a tropical storm, and then start to shoot off towards the northwest and actually gather a little bit of pace, not just in its movement but in its intensity. Here's Calvin. GFS has been quite generous with it by the looks of things there. I don't think it will have that much intensity because it initializes the storm still as a hurricane, but by the time it does make landfall on the Big Island, which is in around probably 3 days now, it will certainly justify tropical storm watches and warnings by the looks of things. It will probably still have winds of around 50 miles per hour when it gets there. After Hawaii, there's very little left of it and it shouldn't persist very long. Western Pacific, of course, this is the hub of activity. Talim doesn't have that long to strengthen, but it could still get to Category 2. And then there's that next system behind it that forms near Palau and then moves up northwards into the Philippine Sea. And the GFS takes that one to town, really strengthening a tight core there. And maybe a third system behind that to the southeast of it as well. Well out to sea, not the one we were expecting, but we've not marked that one yet. And possibly that system once again in the South China Sea, although the GFS has backed off a lot on that one, and so have the other models. So Talim then, it's going to be a substantial typhoon landfall, at least a Category 1, and it will cause heavy rainfall over large parts of the Leizhou Peninsula into westernmost reaches of China with the border with Vietnam, and also inland further east in Guangdong province as well, near Hong Kong and that region. The rainfall expectations will be getting up towards 10 inches in a few spots along that zone there. That's 250 millimeters. One or two spots in Vietnam will have incidental rainfall amounts even higher from the monsoon region, with up to 12 inches. And look at Thailand, a massive situation going on there. They could get extraordinary amounts of rainfall not associated with these storms, and a big swathe of rainfall approaching the Philippines there as well, and Palau could get in excess of 250 millimeters in the next 7 days. Longer range, we watched the progress of Don. Well, it ended up dying off in the end. I couldn't quite see what happened with that loop, so we'll play it again. There's Don continuing off towards the north. It actually gets close to hurricane status on that GFS run. That's quite remarkable. I don't think the other models back that though, and it continues off along the North Atlantic eventually towards Western Europe as a remnant low. And down in the deeper tropics, we're looking at that wave that's moving through. That's a 10% we gave. Briefly becomes a tropical storm on the GFS, but other models aren't convinced. It's not the same system, but further ahead of it, something else forms there and starts to sweep through the Greater Antilles, possibly reaching hurricane status as it gets there in the eastern Caribbean Sea. That's very close to the end of the 10-day period there. It's 25th of July, it's moves through there, so be very wary of that projection so far. Western Pacific, we have large systems there. You saw the end of it before the start, but here is what happens. That system that we've currently marked, that 70%, it curves back towards the northeast away from the Philippines, comes enormous in strength at least typhoon there, pressure down to 930s potentially. That could become a strong Category 4, maybe a super typhoon. The system eventually forms in the South China Sea, and another system off to the east of that first one, but that South China Sea system becomes quite broad, becomes a typhoon eventually on towards the end of that 10-day period as well. Long range, so not too much credit to it right now. Scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a gander at all of the stuff we have, as well as our still waiting for Hone t-shirts, because they'll definitely be in stock for quite some time yet. Well, into the Scilly Range, more drama and action with this potential hurricane sweeping through Cuba and into the Gulf of Mexico and heading on towards Louisiana, or maybe just east of there towards Mississippi and Alabama and off towards the northeast of the United States. That is a hurricane landfall possibly for the US, but once again we have to stress that's a very long way out and may completely disappear on the next model run. Incidentally, another vortex there to the west, possibly tropical depression, moving towards southern Texas. And on the western Pacific view, the 70% system becomes an enormous donut there, rolling along through the East China Sea. Massive system in the end, and strong through towards the Korean Peninsula. That would be a big body blow there for the Korean Peninsula towards the end of that loop. The second system moves northwards in the end into the Gulf of Tonkin and makes landfall as a Category 1 or 2 in northern Vietnam, and then two more systems form after that for the next phase of the Western Pacific activity. If all of this comes to fruition, we'll have quite a busy end of July. You can talk about all of this on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather and general chat with fellow weather watchers from around the world. Talk about anything in there, not just the tropics, general weather and general chat too. On this day, look at that, 2 Category 5s active at the same time. Not very often you see that. It was Hurricane Emily, quite disputed that Category 5 status these days, and Typhoon Haitang, which was peaking as a Category 5 on this day as well. A little bit more on the 16th, but it was still holding on into the 17th before it started to weaken as it headed towards Taiwan. Emily, of course, was a substantial storm as well that went through the Yucatan Peninsula. What a year that was as well. And to think of it, it was 18 years ago now on this day. Back to this year, Don might continue that clean sweep of tropical storms. Emily's the next name in the Atlantic, Dora's next up in the Eastern Pacific, and of course we're still waiting for Hone in the Central Pacific. But I wouldn't set you watch, it's not going to be anytime soon. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Doksuri, and in the North Indian Ocean, it is still Tej. 29 storms so far this year. If Don gets tropical status, it will be added to our tally. We only covered tropical storms on that number. It will be number 30. And in the Australian region, the next name there is Jasper. Southwest Indian Ocean starts the naming list with Alvaro, and the South Pacific, it's going to be Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.